everybody. I'd just like to reassure everyone that the crisis has been averted. I got down to Morrison's this morning and I got a pack of Yorkshire tea bags. So tea is restored to the Parish of Our Lady of Walsingham, and alongside that, my sanity. So thanks be to God for that. Thanks also, Yorkshire tea bags, for your like on Twitter. If you want to sort me out some free tea bags, I won't say no. We'll see. Anyway, to the matter that I was going to present today. On Wednesday's Mass, we heard the Gospel of the road to Emmaus, where two disciples, after Jesus' crucifixion, and they don't know it yet, his resurrection, bump into Jesus along the road. And it's such a beautiful gospel that I thought today, as we go into or get ready to begin our second week of Easter, I thought we might take that with us. So I'm going to read the gospel now. It's from Luke chapter 24, verse 13 to 35. The translation I'm using is the Jerusalem Bible. Two of the disciples of Jesus were on their way to a village called Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking together about all that had happened. Now, as they talked this over, Jesus himself came up and walked by their side. But something prevented them from recognizing him. He said to them, "What matters are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped short, their faces downcast. Then one of them, called Cleopas, answered him, "You must be the only person staying in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have been happening there these last few days." "What things?" he asked. "All about Jesus of Nazareth," they answered, "who proved he was a great prophet by the things he said and did in the sight of God and of the whole people, and how our chief priests and our leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death and had him crucified. Our own hope had been that he would be the one to set Israel free. And that is not all. 2 whole days have gone by since it all happened, and some women from our group have astounded us. They went to the tomb in the early morning, and when they did not find the body, they came back to tell us that they had seen a vision of angels who declared he was alive. Some of our friends went to the tomb and found everything exactly as the women had reported, but of him they saw nothing." Then he said to them, "You foolish men, so slow to believe the full message of the prophets. Was it not ordained that the Christ should suffer and so enter into his glory?" Then, starting with Moses and going through all the prophets, he explained to them the passages throughout the scripture that were about himself. When they drew near to the village to which they were going, he made as if to go on, but they pressed him to stay with them. "It is nearly evening," they said, "and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. Now while he was with them at table, he took the bread and said the blessing. Then he broke it and handed it to them. And their eyes were opened and they recognized him, but he had vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us as he talked to us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" They set out that instant and returned to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 assembled together with their companions, who said to them, "Yes, it is true. The Lord has risen and he has appeared to Simon." Then they told their story of what had happened on the road and how they had recognized him at the breaking of the bread. They told their story of what had happened on the road and how they had recognized him at the breaking of the bread. Now, in the Gospels, we hear lots of accounts of how Jesus appears to the women, to his apostles, and in the Acts of the Apostles to the multitude. But there's something very special about this story. All of the other accounts are of those who see Jesus. As I'm looking at you and you're seeing me, they see him. But this one is about a different kind of seeing, one which reaches far deeper into the hearts of those who recognize him. These disciples see Jesus at the moment that he disappears physically. And so I want to journey through this gospel as we read it. Just read through it again slowly to see how we can come to that deeper seeing of Jesus, and how in these times in our lives we can, as St. Paul, who never saw Jesus in the flesh, can experience the power of his resurrection. And so let's start from the beginning. It says, 2 of the disciples of Jesus were on their way to a village called Emmaus. Now, I went to the Holy Land 8 years ago, and in the gospel here it says Emmaus is 7 miles from Jerusalem, so you think it would be easy to locate. And in fact, when I was on the guide bus with my group on that trip, the guide there said, over there is the village of Emmaus, which is Emmaus. And I was like, I was fascinated because it reminded me of that story. But since then, I've learned that there are 4 claimants of sites to be Emmaus, to be the place where Emmaus was or is. And it makes you think, 4 sites, 7 miles from Jerusalem, that corresponds to north, south, east, or west. In other words, it could be anywhere. And perhaps that's what Luke was aiming at. As the disciples journey towards a place, Luke might be choosing a deliberately obscure place to suggest that the journey that they're going on is their very own unique journey. And so he's drawing us into our own unique journey as Jesus draws up alongside them. He draws up alongside us. And so it says they're talking about all that's happened. Now, as they talk this over, Jesus himself came up and walked by their side. And again, Luke's choice of language is never by accident. He's suggesting what theologians call a theophany, God who is appearing in mystery. Like the God of the Israelites descends in a cloud and can't be seen, Jesus is making his presence felt, but not necessarily understood or known. Not yet. There is mystery to be unfolded. And that's what it says in the gospel. It says something prevented them from recognizing him. It doesn't say what. It's not like he was wearing a big nose, glasses, and a moustache, but something prevented them. Maybe what prevents them is their own readiness to see. In fact, the story suggests that heavily. So Jesus asks them, he says, what matters are you discussing as you walk along? Sounds very polite, doesn't it? Sounds like they're just having a conversation and someone's gone, what are you talking about? But in fact, in the Greek, Jesus says this, hus antibalete pros angelus. Antibalete is the key verb here. I mean, we get the word anti-ballistic. You know, if someone goes ballistic, is that a calm conversation? You know, no, people are firing missiles at one another. In other words, these 2 disciples are having a fight. They are trying to impose their version of events of what happened on one another. They're having a real set to over this event. And so Jesus seems to kind of cut the conversation short, though. Just by asking the question, it's as if he's burst their balloon. While they're embroiled in their fight, they can fool themselves that they think they know what's happened. They think they can interpret away all of the events of the last few days. And Jesus, just by asking the question, causes them to, as it says, to stop short, their faces downcast. Now that word downcast is quite significant here. In the Greek it's skuthropoi. And there's only one other place in all of the whole Bible where that word is used, and that's with Joseph when he's in prison in Genesis. Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, and he's with 2 prisoners who it says are looking downcast. And so he says, well, why are you so downcast? Skuthropoi. And they said, well, you know, we've fallen on hard times and we've had these dreams and we don't know how to interpret them. Well, Joseph is the master dream interpreter, so he has a go. So what is Luke suggesting here? Luke is suggesting that Jesus, like Joseph, is about to interpret for the disciples what has happened. what happened on Good Friday and what is happening now on the dawn or the dusk leading into the dawn of Easter Sunday. But then Cleopas, it says, then one of them called Cleopas answered him, "You must be the only person staying in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have been happening there these last few days." So it's very suggestive, isn't it? You must be the only person staying in Jerusalem. In other words, Cleopas has probably picked up on an accent or maybe a demeanor of Jesus which suggests to him that he's a bit of a foreigner, a bit of an outsider. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Those over there, like even in London, you talk about South London. I'm from northeast London. You're like these South Londoners, only down the road, but the divide might as well be as big as the Atlantic Sea. So he's saying, you're different from us. You don't understand. We do. Let me tell you what happened. It says, all about Jesus of Nazareth, they answered, who proved he was a great prophet. So this is what we understand by the things he said and did in the sight of God, and how our chief priests and our leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death and had him crucified. Our own hope had been that he would be the one to set Israel free. That's their interpretation of Jesus, a Messiah who was for them and who was going to establish this small people over the whole world. That's what these two guys are arguing about. In other words, it hasn't happened. Why hasn't it happened? Maybe something else is going to happen. Maybe the Lord is going to come in his power. They're kind of lost in their need to understand, to get it, to grasp and control, much like the Messiah that they were hoping Jesus would be. And then they go on. And that is not all. 2 whole days have gone by since it all happened, and some women from our group have astounded us. And then they go on to say that they went to the tomb, they had a vision, but there was no body there. They go back to report to the disciples who come along and check, and it says, but of him, Jesus, they saw nothing. In other words, it's empty tomb, but no, as yet, apparition or appearance of Jesus. Now, I pick up a note of despair in this story they've told. I think they've keyed into the stolen body narrative. In Matthew's Gospel, for example, the scribes and Pharisees say to the guards, "Keep a guard over that tomb because we know what's going to happen." Jesus has been talking about rising from the dead. They all believe he's going to rise from the dead, so they're probably going to steal the body to keep the story going. So when these disciples say, "But of him they saw nothing," in other words, they're saying, well, it's probably, probably someone's stolen the body. We can't really believe what these women have told us. That's a suggestion. So you can see why they're downcast. Jesus has burst their bubble. He's revealed what their expectations were, their worldly expectations, and how disappointed they are. They don't believe in the resurrection, in its deeper significance. But then he says to them, "You foolish men, so slow to believe the full message of the prophets. Was it not ordained that the Christ should suffer and so enter into his glory?" And they're probably thinking, well, I guess so, but, where's the party? Where's the cake? Where's the conquest in all of that? And then it says, then starting with Moses and going through all the prophets, he explained to them the passage throughout the scriptures that were about himself. In other words, Jesus is taking the narrative that they had received. He is taking the narrative of the scribes and of the Pharisees, of the story of a Messiah, and reinterpreting the scriptures for them. No longer are they just seeing with the eyes inherited from Mosaic teaching, the eyes of Moses. He is helping them to see through his own eyes. Jesus is the true interpreter of events, of the scriptures, And he's really revealing himself to be the true interpretation of what has just happened and what happens throughout each and every single life. And then it's interesting. They seem to be drawn in by this stranger, this teacher. They're getting closer to him as he gets closer to them. When they drew near to the village to which they were going, Emmaus, or wherever their heart was taking them, it said, he made as if to go on. Now this is the Theophany 101. Jesus has come up to them, and now he is passing over them, which is exactly how God appeared to all of his patriarchs and prophets in the Old Testament. And yet, God would say, you can't see my face. No one can see the face of God and live. But Moses' particular plea, his desperation was, God, let me see your face. And God would say, you may only see me from behind. And so he passes through. And that's exactly what Jesus is doing. He's passing by, and he makes as if to go on. In other words, shows his back. And they say, no, stay with us. It is nearly evening, they said, and the day is almost over. Now, let's go back to the beginning of John's Gospel. Do you remember when the first disciples come up to Jesus? They've heard about him, and you know they meet him, and everyone's saying this could be the Messiah, and Jesus turns to them, and he says, "What do you want?" I've always been fascinated by that question and how they respond, because they don't answer. They don't say, well, we want you, Jesus. We want this. We want that. In fact, they can't say what they want. But they respond with a question. Lord, where are you staying? All they know, without being able to say, is that they want to stay with him. They're revealing a desire to learn what to want from the one that they desire. In other words, they're asking for more of what they've just received in this episode. Their interpretation of life doesn't work. Their understanding of God isn't functioning for them. And they're saying, show us. In other words, show us the face of God. Stay with us, Lord. And so, what does it say? So he went in to stay with them. Now here comes the crucial moment. Now while he was with them at table, he took the bread and said the blessing. Then he broke it and handed it to them. And their eyes were opened and they recognized him. They have new eyes. Everything that they had experienced with Jesus, the whole journeying with him through his life on earth, and now passing through the crucifixion and receiving this new interpretation, has given them a new set of eyes. And for the first time in their life, they see the face of God. And they recognize him in that moment, which they would have remembered from a few days before, in the breaking of the bread. And thus they reveal to us exactly how the breaking of the bread really works. They reveal to us that through this memory of the Last Supper, God is made truly present. And that's why it's a memorial sacrifice. And that's why in celebrating the Eucharist, Jesus is made truly present and reveals himself to the eyes that see. The eyes that see with his very own eyes. And then he vanishes. They no longer need to see with these things in their head, because true vision has been imprinted upon their hearts. And it's this vision that enables them to go out and to tell everybody else. And then, and this is important, and then this message that they carry is confirmed to them. And I do think this is how the church works in our lives. The church isn't there to impose understanding. It's not there to set rules and to tell you this is how you must believe, but to confirm from its own experience, which we call tradition, a true encounter with the risen Lord. These disciples, they've encountered him. Jesus has revealed himself to them directly in an unmistakable way. But they run to the apostles who, in the meantime, have already met Jesus. That happens sort of like parallel to this maybe. And they say, yes, it is true. The Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon. That's how the church works in our lives. That's why the church is so important. That's why Jesus founded it. So that it would be the vessel, the portal, the container through which we can have confirmed our personal and unique experiences of the risen Lord. And that's what makes us church. Not groupthink, not an imposition from above, but unique individual experiences of the unique individual Lord gathered together. And that's what makes the people of God. And the wonderful thing about this, particularly in our times of lockdown and separation, is that though we love so much to gather together, and we will, and it will be glorious when it happens, these unique experiences of the risen Christ are still happening. Stories are still being told. The risen Lord is still making himself known in the lives of men and women everywhere. And through our modern means of communication, we still get to share them in a very special way. During this time, let the Lord Jesus into your lives. Ask him in prayer, Lord, give me the eyes to see. I don't know what to want, but you know what I want. Show yourself to me, Lord. Walk alongside me. Pass over me and pass through me so that I may bear your message to the world. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.